as we stated last week, in parallel to the most overrated wrestlers of all time, which surprisingly, not that anyone cares, but as far as social media goes, we haven't had a lot of resistance from the overrated post. What we got a lot of debate on was the worst champs, interestingly. I thought we'd probably get a similar response to the overrated, especially because one of them I listed was Hulk Hogan.
I noticed no one really challenged that, really.
Yeah, funny that. So surprisingly, when we mentioned these people who were overrated, most of you just went, yeah, they fucking are. So that's good. I like that. So let's see if it works for the underrated, eh? So I'll kick off if I could, Cal. And I'm going to kick off with Dustin Rhodes or Goldust.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, I can't sit here and go, oh, do you remember this match? Do you remember that match? I'm more talking in general with Goldust, because if you think about it, he is a man who's clearly very talented. You know, he's got the skills in the ring. He knows how to put a character across. Like, really speaking, Goldust as a character should not work. You know, it's like really kind of off-putting, but in like a really intriguing way. Like, even back in the day when they set it up, and it was so freaky, but like intriguing. You can understand how he managed to get that over. But the weird thing with, and I don't know if you'll agree with this or not, but I feel like he's almost like a victim of generations, because like when my generation were really into wrestling, he was sort of the sideshow in the mid card, as it were.
Yeah.
And then, you know, his younger brother or half brother Cody comes along, and he's the future of the business. And I feel like Goldust is underrated because he's genuinely really good wrestler. If you look at some of the fantastic matches he's put on with AEW, never mind WWE, and you can see that. But I feel like he's never managed to be like that top tier. And now he's sort of he's on the other side of it now. He's on the heading towards retirement, let's say, and it's all about Cody, and Cody's the future of the biz, and he's going to be the top tier. So for me, I'm just looking at like, and he's had a great career. I'm not trying to put it down, but I feel like he's never been in the main event scene with WWE, as far as I recall, unless you want to correct me on that, Carl. He's always been that sort of mid-card guy, but what a mid-card guy. He's a fantastic wrestler. He's always put on good matches. Yeah. You know, he's always been an intriguing character, and I think he deserves to be, because he's such a fantastic worker that he's helped propel a lot of people, and you know, I don't think there's any denying that. And for that reason, he is my first one as an underrated wrestler.
I think he's a great pick. I think you hit the nail on the head when you said he's kind of a victim of the times, really, because when you think about it, he had his big standout in the Attitude Era, and it was the early Attitude Era. It was at a point where WWE still had crazy gimmicks and characters, but was starting to transition into the kind of real life, you know, attitudes of people, and like the, you know, fuck the man and that kind of thing, like the Austin and McMahon stuff, for example. But Goldust was just so good early on, because he was just this bizarro kind of hypersexualized kind of character that was like, oh God, who is this guy? He had some phenomenal feuds. He had a really good feud with Piper, which was the kind of the Hollywood backlot brawl that he had. He had a fantastic feud with Triple H. It was really, really good as well. And yeah, it's such a shame, really. I feel like he absolutely could have been like a main event guy, but he was just a victim of those times. Like if the kind of 97, 98 would have carried on a little bit more, then I could have seen him making a rise to the main event scene. But it was around the kind of towards the end of 97, 98 when he kind of really went the other way with the kind of more realistic, I guess.
I think. And it was funny. It was around late 90s, early 2000s. I want to say that he ultimately left WWE as well.
Yeah, you know, he had some very personal demons of his own that he had to kind of figure out. He was very he had some really poor times there. I think some hard times for him, but I don't even mean that as a pun from his dad. But
but no, you could argue, like, had it not been for maybe those personal demons and had he have stuck with WWE, he might have saw that rise. I mean, we've seen it with the likes of Jim Christian and the like, where they had that time served and then they propelled into that main event scene. Maybe we could have seen something like that with him. I don't know, but for me, he's always felt like a victim of time and circumstance, because like before you know it, Cody's there. He's getting the rub from the likes of Triple H and all that. Now he's like, one of the big head figures in AEW, and they love each other. You know, I'm not trying to push an animosity between them, but you know, he is like, Cody's the future of the biz now, isn't he? Really? So, I don't know. It almost feels like a missed opportunity for Dustin.
Yeah, and it's a shame because when he did finally come back, he was the comedy character then. So the whole kind of thing that made him unique and the kind of like mystique and the scary kind of horribleness to him was kind of gone. But he was just more like
it's
him
funny
and
actually,
T,
like
funny,
how much of a change that made, because I think you hit the nail on the head. Like he wasn't like freaky or scary anymore. He was just a total goofball. Like almost our truth levels of comedy. Like, and it's like, what happened there? Like,
well, I mean, they were even a tag team at one point, weren't they? The Golden Truth. So
of course, yeah,
there you go.
that's a prime
Definitely
example
our
of
truth levels.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think that was a fantastic first entry. My first one on the list, it probably won't come as a surprise to anyone, but I think it's
I can see the notes, guys. You're not going to be shocked.
It's a road quite well travelled on this show, but I say it quite often. There's obviously the Swiss Superman that is Cesaro. You know, no bones about it. I'm a huge Cesaro mark. I just think it's absolutely tragic that he hasn't gone on to be a megastar. Like, he's got the size, he's got the look. You know, that in itself has made like superstars careers, but he's got the in-ring work to go with it as well. Like, he's literally almost the complete package, just his mic work. But that aside, like, we've seen it with so many people, and I say it so often, and I sound like a broken record. Just give him a mouthpiece, give him an advocate, give him somebody, to like help him shine. I think, you know, there was a point there where he had like his little tuxedo and he was like the Swiss James Bond and stuff, and that felt a bit too hokey. Do you know what I mean? Like, he doesn't need any of that shit. He is, you know, he lets his in-ring work do the talking for him. So just have that be his character.
It's not quite the same example, but they could book him similar to Carrion, where he's built, he's intimidating, and he doesn't need to say a lot, and he's got an advocate speaking for him. That's all. You know, that would work. They could have done a very similar booking. Obviously, we're getting that with Carrion now, so now it'd just be like copying. But that to me straight away is something they could have done with it. They could have. I'm not saying put Paul Heyman with everyone, but you know, put Paul Heyman with him. Okay, why not?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like, there's no reason why not. Imagine a Brock Lesnar versus Cesaro match if Paul Heyman got Cesaro over for like the next year, then Brock finally comes back, and it's like almost like a passing of the torch to a degree, where Brock finally hangs it up and Cesaro's the guy now. Like, there's so many things you could have done with that.
That's the thing, yeah. It's it is I totally agree with you. It's a crying shame. He's been grinding away in WWE for a number of years. I don't even know how long he's been there, but it feels like easily well over a decade now.
Yeah,
correct me if I'm wrong.
He's been, you know, he was a tag team champion with Tyson Kidd. He was a tag team champion with Sheamus. He's a tag champ now with Shinsuke. So,
I mean, I'm a bit worried for Shinsuke. A bit worried for Shinsuke now, looking at his previous tag team partners. They all seem to suffer some sort of injury.
Yeah, maybe it's him. Maybe that's his gimmick. Yeah, I don't know. I just think it's just a crying shame. I think I know a lot of the guys over at AEW said like if they could bring Cesaro in, like he'd be a megastar for them. So it's just I just feel like sometimes WWE just need to kick up the arse and just look at the talent you've got and stop just kind of pushing over people who can, you know, talk as far as you're concerned, but are nothing.
I could be totally wrong, but I'm confident there's like a handful of people who've got their mates, and I think that's the problem. I think if you could get rid of the favoritism out of it, and they just pick who they can work with and who's actually over with the crowds and stuff like that, it'd be so much better. But you can clearly see this, like, well, he's getting a push because clearly he's mates with someone. Because, like, again, don't want to be bitter and thingy about it. I've already listed him in a previous list, but why is Bobby Lashley getting a push over Cesaro?
No idea.
Like, it baffles me, and it's not an against Lashley, but like, what has he done in WWE that makes you think he deserves it? I've not really seen much of him, and I'm not intrigued.
Do you know what? It was interesting. I don't know. I don't think we covered it on the news just then, but you know, MVP's just signed one of those 5-year contracts. I think like a multi-year deal.
Oh, the don't go to AEW contract. Did he sign one of those?
So it's like, yeah. So, which is crazy, really, because why? But,
I know, right?
I feel like that's a prime example of like why the likes of people like that are getting stuff like. I'd be really interested to see if they offer kind of Cesaro a contract like that, because if they don't see value in him, get him out the door, because he could be a megastar somewhere else. It's just crazy.
That's the thing, and it doesn't even have to be AEW. He'd do well in TNA. He'd do well in NWA. He's
in Japan.
He'd do well in Japan. He would do really well in Japan. He could easily match their style quite well. I think that'd be a good shout. Not that we'd see him because we don't watch it, but or not consistently.
I mean, that'd be the only shame. But yeah, I don't know. I just feel like he's floundering a bit, and I said I was quite brutal with Ali before, like so I'm not gonna say the same for Cesaro. Like, is Cesaro happy? Is he just sat there and just waiting to be given something? If so, then fair dues. But I'd like to think that for whatever reason, like they can find something to do with him. Is what it is.
No, I agree. Okay, well, I'm going to go to mine, Carl. Number three, because I stopped doing the numbers. So number 3, right? I'm totally justified in this as well. I don't care what you say, Carl. Right? My number 3 is William Regal. Right? Because not only is William Regal a fantastic wrestler, an absolute fucking technician in the ring, not only has he got a ton of charisma, and honestly, one of the more memorable heels of the early 2000s was Regal, if you think about it, right? All the stuff he did with Sean O'Haire, awesome, right? Not only that, he's also trained some of the people that you all fucking love. He's been involved in training the likes of Daniel Bryan. He's been involved in training CM Punk. He's been heavily involved in that side of it. He knows the business in and out. He's an absolute fucking legend and deserves way more recognition than he gets. And here's my example as to why I think he's underrated. Because if he made a return to the ring today, to Raw or SmackDown, he would not get the same pop as the likes of Undertaker or Shawn Michaels, when in actual fact he's put in well over 20 years now in the business.
Probably more, to be fair. I think
I've said well over 20 just to be safe. He probably hasn't done as much as Undertaker, but close to, right? But that's my prime example as to why he's underrated, because he wouldn't get the same pop from the crowd, even though he so fucking deserves it. And he's fantastic on NXT. He makes a great general manager. Not that you get to see much of him, but Regal, absolute legend. And I'm not just saying that because he's a fellow Brit, and they say he's from Blackpool, even though his accent kind of suggests he's not. But anyway, my number 3 has to be Regal, because, how can you not pick Regal?
I think it's a fantastic pick. I fucking love Regal. He's a legend. Like,
how good is Regal as a heel?
Oh God! I mean,
he's such a good heel.
Do you remember all the stuff like back when he was even commissioner? Like the comedy levels of the stuff he did. Like, he was a fantastic, entertaining character. And is it like in ring work? Like, to be honest, that could be the thing that held him back, was his style. It was a very British old school chain wrestling kind of shtick that he had, and maybe that was just not what WWE wanted to invest in. Like, he was a fantastic European champ. I think he was an IC champ at one point as well. But yeah, God, he could have definitely gone on to be like one of the best heels, or something in the business the way he was. But yeah, God, he's so underrated. He was fantastic. The stuff he did with Tajiri, the stuff he did.
I totally forgot about Tajiri for a sec there.
Yeah, like all that stuff, all the European title matches and stuff like that. Like, he really made that his own as well. But
to be honest, I think he made the European title something when at a time when it didn't really have a lot of recognition as well. In all fairness,
agreed. I think though as well, like similar to the Dustin Rhodes shout, I think this might come up quite a bit in this segment. Is he, by all accounts, had a number of demons himself, which saw him go away from TV for
that's the thing, because he did disappear from TV for a good while. Then he started doing some stuff off camera, and obviously now we see him as the commissioner here and there, or is it commissioner, general manager, whatever he is, of NXT here and there. But yeah, I take your point that maybe he was fall a victim to that as well, and it stopped that rise, as it were. And I'll point it out, not to digress, but I'll point it out before it gets pointed out either by you or someone else, Carl, that he didn't get along with Goldberg. So yeah, another plus, another tick.
Pretty much everybody on the planet must be fine by you then, because apparently by all accounts everyone thinks he's a piece of shit.
Unless you watch the fucking product and then you're like, Goldberg's awesome. Like, why?
Yeah, who knows? Kids these days. Okay, so the next one, number 4, and my second one of the segment, if you will, is the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. For me, and this is a very bold statement,
Oh, go on.
he could have been the biggest heel of all time. So
now,
I
don't know DiBiase that well, but from a character point of view, I can kind of see where you're coming from. But
for
sorry,
me,
I don't mean to interrupt them.
Like for me, he was Vince McMahon before Vince McMahon was a thing. He was everything that you wanted the babyface to rise up and fight against. He was a fucking millionaire, obviously, hence his name. He bought everything, like the world was his oyster. He was a terrible human being. He used to come out and just be like do all these heely things and just embarrass people and like make the crowd just do like really, shameful things and stuff in the hope to win like $100 or whatever it was. And he was just such a fantastic heel, and he just never got that main event run. Like I know we had him on another segment as like being one of the like the worst champions of all time, solely for the fact that he was never really a proper champion. He's never officially recognised as being the world champ, and it's just such a shame. Like for me, he is the kind of like the ultimate mega heel, isn't he? He's just someone that you would always root the babyface to kind of go and just like stand up against this fucking tyrant, and it just never happened.
No, I take your point. He's like, yeah, he's sort of the default heel, isn't he? And not in a bad way, but like, how could he ever be anything else?
Well, exactly. Like he's got his little $1 million laugh and everything as well. He was just like he's so good. Like I'm a proper Ted DiBiase fan. It's just it's
you need to get yourself $1 million belt, Carl.
Do you know what? Of all the belts, I think that would be one of the ones I would get.
Do you know what? I think the internet's ruining me because the more I look on TikTok and stuff like that, and I see people with their collections of belts, I'm like, I should start a belt collection, which is the worst fucking thing. Like, no offense, like I'm not saying worst in that sense. It must be awesome to have that collection, but I'm like, that's gonna cost so much money.
I know, yeah. And then like, where'd you put them all? It's all these different.
That's the thing. I would not win that fight. I would not win that argument to have them displayed on the wall.
No, exactly. It's like, I've just spent thousands of dollars on these. Oh, cool. Where are they? In this box that I've got to hide away in the wardrobe. I'm not allowed to get out. So, yeah, I don't know. Like, like if you look at the likes of Sergeant Slaughter, for example, and it's no disrespect to him, but like he was the WWF champion for a period because he went with like the whole kind of Iran like storyline and had the Hogan be the American hero going against Sergeant Slaughter, who'd allied himself with them and stuff like that. And you look at these kind of things that you had going as like champions, and it's like $1 Million Man should have definitely been there. And I feel like because he was never world champ and he just kind of got overlooked, and he ended up becoming a tag star with obviously Bray Wyatt's dad, Michael Thunder, or the IRS. So he just kind of when people look back, they just think of him as like this silly guy in like a flashy suit who was like with the taxman, and it's like, well, like no, this guy could have been a top level like main event heel.
No, and I can't. Sadly, I can't offer a great deal because it's not really my era of wrestling. But that being said, we all know the $1 Million Man. He transcends the generations in that sense. Like, everyone's heard of him. Absolute legend in the biz. And I take your point on everything you've said there.
And he actually did pay me to talk about him because everyone's got a price for the $1 Million Man.
Yeah. And that being said, Ted, where's my paycheck, you fucker? Right. So that being said, weirdly ending it on me calling him a fucker, but there you go. We'll move on to number 5, Carl. Yeah, I'm on camera. There we go. It's not Booker. It's not Booker. Now I'm going to try and go a little bit more modern than I have been on my last 2. I'm going to mention Shelton Benjamin. And surprisingly, I say surprisingly, I don't think it's surprising that he's on the list. But my reasoning for him being on the list is because I'm watching Raw week in, week out now. And for some reason, the last few weeks, Shelton's aligned himself with MVP. And I'm looking at the 3 of them fucking stood there, and I'm like, why is he like the 3rd tier in that fucking trio? Like, this guy should have been a world champ could still be a world champ, is a hell of a fucking athlete. When he came into it, when he was getting his push under Kurt Angle with the world's greatest tag team with Charlie Haas, for me, and I don't know if you'll agree with it, Carl, but he was always going to be the breakout star of that tag team anyway.
Yeah.
You know, he was going for it all, just trying to be the best. Anyway, sorry. For me, I don't get, but I do kind of get, because he left again potentially a little too early. But he should have always ended up in the main event scene. And even now, I'm looking at like it's clearly going to be Lashley that they're pushing again in the main event scene. I don't know if they're going to wait a bit of time or whatever. There, and you're putting Shelton with the 24/7 belt for some fucking reason, which no one really cares about anyway. Like, if you're going to go with your stable, right, and Lashley's going to be your big guy, right, why is Shelton going for that one? Why isn't he going for the US title? Why are we putting it on MVP? Or trying to?
No idea.
That's another fuck up we'll talk about. Anyway, so yeah, for that reason, solely because I remember Shelton coming into the business. I remember him coming in as the world's greatest tag team with Kurt Angle as their sort of mentor. And I remember thinking he was a fucking hell of an athlete then. If you look at any of the ladder matches he's had and that sort of thing, you can clearly see how much of a fucking brilliant in-ring performer he is. But it's just a shame he's never reached that sort of top tier main event scene. And for that reason, he's my number 5.
Again, I think it's a really good choice. I think the only thing holding him back, similar to what we said with a few, is mic work, unfortunately, because he went through that little rise, didn't he? In when he got moved to Raw, and you know he was the IC champion. He had that amazing match with Shawn Michaels. He had some stuff with Triple H as well, where he beat Triple H, who was the champion at the time, and he kind of got a bit of momentum behind him. But then it just kind of fizzled out, and then he came back with the gold standard. Shelton Benjamin, where he dyed his hair blonde, and it was like, oh, that's funny, he's gold. But that didn't really take off for him either. And it was just, I don't know if he was a little bit too much of like the Ziggler effect, where he was so good. And I know Ziggler's kind of the Ziggler effect more for selling than anything else, but Benjamin made his opponents look a lot better than he kind of made himself sometimes. I don't know whether that was another kind of factor of why he never just kind of broke out, maybe.
Maybe, yeah. Yeah, I can see where you're getting the connection to Ziggler there. It might be a very valid point there. And again, not to harp on, because it seems I do this for every entry, but I think had he have maybe carried on with WWE instead of leaving like he did, and don't get me wrong, rightly so at the time, possibly because he wasn't being utilised very well. But again, sometimes tenure gets you the opportunities, and maybe he'd be world champ level by now had he have not left WWE. But you can never understand how contract negotiations work. You don't know what side broke down, whether WWE went, yeah, off your pop or what. But either way, crying shame.
And plus, we both got to high five him, I believe, at one of the
Damn right,
WWE events.
Absolute legends. I can't remember where we were, but we high five Shelton Benjamin.
I don't remember where we were. It was either Newcastle or Sheffield. It was one of the two.
I feel like it might have been Newcastle.
Yeah, well, yeah, it was good, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I remember a lot about that day.
That makes it sound that's a whole different podcast episode by the sounds of that.
Yeah, confessions of a. No, because there was this was probably for me anyway my first time seeing a lot of these people I was seeing on TV live. So you were getting the likes of Christian and that, who was well into his heel run at the time. He refused to high five me. Still love you, Christian, but I'll not forget.
He then went in and he cut a promo calling us all a bunch of limey bastards. I remember
he did call us limeys. Yeah, I remember. Was it Victoria in a Divas match? I distinctly remember that. Don't remember much about the match or who she was fighting. Remember that. But,
I remember I got to stroke Victoria's arm once.
You did.
And I say stroke. It was it's a horrible term, really, because that's not what
caress.
I intended. But I tried to reach out and stroke the arm. It's very soft, very very soft.
Mm. And and this is why we don't go to wrestling shows anymore, because
we've not been allowed
Carl has a number of restraining orders.
Yeah.
So we can't talk about that right now.
No. So swiftly moving on. So the next one for me, which is number 6, another Brit, is Wade Barrett.
Barrett.
This guy, obviously, he came up through NXT before NXT is what we know as today. I think he had, was it Jericho as his mentor? Jericho
think
or The Miz?
so.
I think it was Jericho.
No, the Miz got Daniel Bryan, didn't he?
Yeah, okay. I think it was Jericho as his mentor, so obviously that was pretty good in the first place. But he came up as like this kind of cocky, Brit, and he got made a fool of a little bit initially, but it was kind of cool. He had the size, he was a big guy, and then the next minute he's the fucking leader of the Nexus, and it's this fucking kick-ass faction, unlike fucking Retribution, which we'll get into.
That's the thing,
But
but that's the thing. Like Retribution this week, for those who have never seen the Nexus, who are only just tuning into wrestling now for some fucking reason, Nexus did what Retribution tried to do this week, which we'll talk about. But Nexus's debut it goes down in the history books in that sense, doesn't it? Really, it was a hell of a debut, hell of an impact.
It was very
before
different.
Impact was a
it
thing.
felt very kind of realistic or raw, of like this. Who the fuck are these guys? They've taken over. They've had enough shit. Like what's happening? And Wade Barrett was the spearhead behind all of that. He was the leader, and it was a massive breakout moment for him. And I think he did a fantastic job. Then out of nowhere, they fucking replaced him with CM Punk. Which, there was a time in my life where I was a big Punk mark, but even that didn't make any sense to me. I was like, well, why? Why does Punk need this?
I'm a little bit hazy about these things, right? But didn't he replace him with Punk after John Cena went out of his way to bury every fucking member of the Nexus?
I mean, that sounds probably like something John Cena would do, yes.
Because again, for those who are unfamiliar with it, and apologies if I've got the order wrong, but I'm confident Punk came in after this. But for some reason, they thought it'd be a good booking for John Cena to beat every member of the Nexus, and I think they did it in one pay-per-view in one night for some fucking reason.
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me because it's John Cena.
Johnny got the golden shovel out and ruined the entire fucking faction for no reason. Then they became the new Nexus, which I believe was then headed by CM Punk for some reason. Which again, why did he need that?
Then they moved Wade over to SmackDown, where he headed up the Core, which was another faction. They were like, okay, so that thing you got over and did really well on Raw. Can you do like a really shit version over on SmackDown? Which obviously, no surprise. He's like,
am I getting the same guys? Like, no, you can have Heath.
Yeah, exactly. So that was shit. And then I'm not sure which order these came in, so you'll have to excuse me. But there was the King Barrett stuff and the Bad News Barrett stuff. Now,
I feel like the Bad News stuff was what he ended on.
Yeah, I think so too. So I think the King, the King Barrett stuff, it's that gimmick that can either make or break you, can't it? And he did a good job. He did the best he could.
Has anyone ever been made by the King thing? Anyone ever? It feels like a death sentence. Corbin's not putting it across. I honestly can't think of one decent King in wrestling, bar Lawler, and I don't think his came from King of the Ring.
No, it's an excellent point, really. I feel like the one who probably did the best with it was King Booker, because I feel like he was quite good.
I feel like the only time King of the Ring's worked is when they win, and then they don't make a big fucking deal about being king.
Oh God, yeah!
Like imagine Austin won. Imagine King Austin. Like that would have just been horrendous. But they didn't lean into that. Like, and I get it, you need something. Like Corbin needed something, and they needed to do something with Barrett. But I've never seen a successful King run. No, even, like you say, Booker's was probably the most entertaining, but not even the best of Booker, really.
Well, that's it. It harms so many more people than it actually helps, and I feel like, unfortunately, in this instance, it harmed Wade to the point where he just kind of did nothing with it. But then he kind of came back with Bad News at Barrett, which was entertaining. I thought was really, really good, and I felt like he
needs a lot of credit for how much he managed to get that over for something that was so kind of stupid.
Yeah, it was he was so good at it, wasn't it? I'm afraid I've got some bad news. Everyone was like playing along and stuff. So for me, he was over at that point, and then they just dropped the ball again.
I know they're not related, but the way he managed to get Bad News Barrett over almost reminds me of Damien Sandow getting over the Mizdow thing.
Yeah.
Because that shouldn't have worked on paper, but he managed to get somewhere with it. And it seems a similar thing with Barrett. Like, I don't know how he did it, but like you say, the charisma alone sold that, because it shouldn't have worked as a gimmick.
He definitely had the charisma. That's why it's such like a travesty, really, because he had the charisma, he had the size, he had the build, he had decent enough in ring work. Like, he wasn't a bad wrestler by any stretch. there was rumors at one point he was going to be the guy that ended the Undertaker streak. So, you know what I mean? How do you go from that to kind of what his career ultimately ended up being, WWE? So, yeah, I just think it's a massive shame, and it's a massive waste of talent again from WWE. Like, because he could have, like, imagine if he was the guy to end Taker's streak, he would have been the biggest heel in the business, wouldn't he? So
that's the thing. And it's funny because we're getting rumors now that he's going to pop back up, and like people are still trying to suggest that like Retribution is going to be headed by a former Nexus member and stuff. I don't think we'll ever see Wade Barrett back in WWE, not anytime soon, anyway. But
No.
he's still loved in a way as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely could come back and be something huge if he wanted to, or if WWE wanted him to.
I believe he's contracted to NWA at the minute and some
he?
sort of like announcing capability.
Genuinely, the last time I saw Wade Barrett was when he was the general manager of Defiant, but when Defiant was a thing. Like, they've since closed shop. NXT UK come along and fuck them over. But yeah, that's the last time I remember seeing him.
Yeah, it's just it's a massive shame, I think. So yeah, I feel like he deserves a place on this list because he could have gone on to be something like awesome, but just didn't happen.
I agree. So number 7, Carl. Number 7. Hang on, that's backwards. Number 7. I still did it wrong. Whatever. Right. So my number 7, Carl, is Lance Storm. Okay. Now, I'm trying to be clever here because like I'm trying to pick things that weren't necessarily my era, right? But the reason I want to pick Lance Storm is because he's not the biggest guy in the world, but he's a fantastic wrestler, right? Mm-hmm. And in all honesty, the Lance I remember was getting done over by WWE really storyline wise, because he was never great on the mic, but he was getting better. And then they saddled him with correct me if I'm wrong, but they saddled him with the whole sort of boring thing. And I think that was kind of a ruiner as far as his character goes, and probably the last time he was really prevalent on TV, in all fairness. But you can't get away from the fact that, like, if you look at his pre-WWE stuff, the stuff he was doing with like the likes of Chris Jericho and that on the independent scene or the Japan scene and that sort of thing, he's a hell of a wrestler, and he's got a lot of presence about him in the ring, really. And I think he could have got somewhere as far as mic skills go. I can't sit here and lie to you and say he was great on the mic. He wasn't, but he had the potential to be. And I feel like he was a victim of WWE's ridiculous bookings, in all honesty. And then he kind of faded into obscurity. So I think he deserves a spot on the list because I think there was something there that was never utilized.
Yeah, I don't think anyone can question his in-ring work. He was one of the best kind of technical wrestlers like ever, really. From all the stuff that he learned in Japan and on the kind of in Mexico and other places like that. And he was a fantastic performer. I think when he came to WWE, for example, that's when it was just a typical. They didn't know what to do with him. They obviously had him because he was Canadian in the kind of Canadian faction at one point.
So the thing, was it like Un-Americans? Was that what they were called?
Un-Americans, yeah. So obviously he was part of that at one point. Then there was also the bit where it was like, I think this was before they buried him with the boring thing. It was kind of like he'd come out and be like, "If I could be serious for a minute," and everyone would like boo him. And that was like the catchphrase.
This is the thing that always upset me with Lance, because like they were pushing the boring gimmick down to his mic skills, but he was not actually that boring in the ring. He was actually quite good in the ring. Like, he'd put on a great match with people. I mean, Jericho obviously would definitely put on a great match with them. They've had a lot of chemistry and a long friendship. But yeah, like for me, it's easy to build the audience around something, and they got behind this boring gimmick, but to the detriment of Lance, because then it's like they're utterly convinced that he's boring, and it's like, I don't know, he almost sold it too well, I suppose, in that sense. But not the best gimmick at all. And as you know, and as we've mentioned many a time, we have a bit of a pet peeve with the whole, you're not from America, so let's use that as a gimmick. But we've seen it done way too many times. This was probably one of the earlier ones, but even so, Un-Americans, what the fuck were they thinking?
Yeah, I mean, there was even that one point where they had an American be part of the Un-American fucking
course,
thing. Rob Conway, didn't he? Was part of La Resistance, whatever they were called at one point.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
Obviously.
They were French, weren't they? Wasn't he?
Yeah, the French guys. Sylvain Grenier, Rene Dupree, and Rob Conway, wasn't it?
How much does Rob Conway? Sorry, that was a dad joke, but in all fairness, I'm a dad, so.
He's allowed. Well allowed. But yeah, no, definitely. I think he's a good one to have on the list because just from his ability alone, he could have gone a long way, which is similar to the next one I have.
Sorry, go on.
Oh, go on.
No, I was going to say, I feel like there was a little bit of a tipping point with WWE around the time for Lance as well, where it was almost oversaturated because this was not necessarily at Invasion Point, but it was obviously when they were getting a lot of WCW stars, and I think they might have had a little bit too many people to work with. Almost what they're victim of these days, in all fairness. But I mean, that was ultimately the reason that they started doing brand splits and the like, because people weren't getting TV time. But I feel like he might have fallen victim to the fact that there was just too many talents there as well.
Yeah, definitely. It got so kind of, they just got everyone who they could from WCW at the time, didn't they? And a lot of them just didn't have anything going for them, unfortunately. So it's a shame. But definitely no one can kind of besmirch his in-ring capabilities, and those alone kind of, he was so underrated in that regard.
Yeah. So sorry, I kind of interrupted your next one. So Carl, number 8.
Number 8, similar to Lance Storm in terms of in-ring capability, is why I feel this guy should be on here, is the Dynamite Kid. So obviously another Brit. We're not biased, I promise. But
this list is 80% British, but we're not biased.
But for me, Dynamite Kid was, pound for pound, the best wrestler in the world. He was really on the short side. I think he was like 5'6", 5'7". There's no denying it. He was a massive steadhead along with Davey Boy Smith. So he was built like a brick shithouse, but he was just so short. And
we give people like us hope.
Well, exactly. But it was at this time, that's when the WWE, WWF at the time, was very big on like 6'5", 6'6", massive, huge kind of Andre versus Hulk Hogan, that kind of thing. So no matter how good a wrestler Tom Billington was, he just couldn't break in. Like, he was always a tag team guy. He was over at Stampede with Davey Boy, as the British Bulldogs. They got brought in along with the Hart Foundation, and it was just tag team, and he never got the opportunity to make a singles run out of it. Whereas Davey, not massive himself in terms of height, I think he was like 5'10", 5'11", something like that. He was only short by WWF standards, but they actually did take a bit of a punt with him, and I know that kind of really irked Dynamite Kid, because he, by all accounts, and there's no denying it really, he was the best wrestler. He was one of the best wrestlers in the world. In Japan, they fucking loved him, but he wanted to make it in the kind of, he wanted the fame. He wanted to be on the
That's the
TV.
thing. Like, WWE is the show, whether people want to admit it or not. Like, you can love as many others as you want. People usually aspire to WWE in the wrestling industry.
Well, that was it. This was at a time where the WWF had just bought all the other territories. There was nowhere to go.
There's nowhere left.
Exactly, like Stampede had gone, like all the fucking competition bar WCW, which wasn't even a big thing yet at that point, was gone. So Dynamite wanted to make it on the big stage, and unfortunately, it just never happened for him. And it's just such a shame, because he was phenomenal as like a worker. Like, if you go and look at, like, I think there's a match from Japan. I can't remember who he was facing, but it was like one of the greatest matches ever. And I remember watching it, and you're just blown away by, especially for that era as well, the stuff that they were doing just didn't happen back then. And yeah, it's just like such a massive shame. I think he ended up getting, quite a bit of depression, and then he ended up having like a couple of strokes and stuff, and he was like confined to a wheelchair for like most of his life. And he was like, because he didn't really make that much money in wrestling despite how good he was, and because of the style he did with, he ended up just becoming like a big kind of like a paraplegic, and he was poor, and he moved back to England, and he was from like Manchester way. Like, I think he was actually from Wigan, to be fair.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was really, really local to us, and yeah, unfortunately, he just kind of just faded into darkness, really, and unfortunately passed away 2 years ago. But if you ever get the chance, you ever want to see a really good old school kind of what wrestling could have been like back in the day, for example, like, you've got to go and check out Dynamite Kid, because he was fantastic. He was the inspiration for the likes of Jericho, for the likes of Chris Benoit, for Eddie, for Lance Storm. Do you know what I mean? This was the guy who was a massive kind of trendsetter, and really kind of hit home that, that hard, fast fucking technical aspect, kind of wrestling with a bit of high flying to boot. So yeah, definitely belongs in there, I think.
Horribly tragic one as well, isn't it? To be fair, like
Yeah.
I'm intrigued. You know what? Because I didn't know a great deal about him. I'm hoping there's some sort of like biography or something I can read, because sounds like a fascinating fella as far as career goes as well.
Yeah, definitely. There's a couple of documentaries I think on YouTube knocking about. I'm not sure we've got a autobiography or anything like that, but
A documentary will do. Yeah, that'll work.
yeah. I mean, if he's got a biography or whatever, I definitely want to read it myself. So
That's it.
I'll lend it to you.
Awesome. So we'll go into number 9 then, have a quick call.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, number 9. I really need to get used to the cameras being flipped. It's throwing me off, something shocking. Anyway, so I'm going to need your help with this one, Carl. And the reason I wanted to list it is because you blew my mind with this little fact a few months ago, I think it was. So I'm picking Jake the Snake Roberts, and I'm picking him purely down to the fact that obviously he was a fantastic wrestler. His mic skills were unparalleled. We've seen him do some fucking awesome promos for AEW. But it was the fact that you gave me that he had never won the World Championship or a World Championship with WWE in his run with WWF, should I say, WWF at the time. He'd never achieved the big belt, the top gold, and that blew my mind, because you just assume he did. Like I was utterly convinced that was the case. Like he obviously did, but he didn't, and for that reason, I'm like, surely he's underrated then, because he was he was genuinely, I think, probably, I'm gonna have to say one of, because there were some fantastic wrestlers out there, but he was one of the best heels in the biz, and you can see now he still cuts a great promo. He's a bit more drawn out, I suppose. You know, he's had his demons. He's come back from a lot, but even so, he can still cut a fucking brilliant promo. And in all fairness, the slight interest I had in the Murder Hawk monster came from him. So
yeah, I think so. Not only had he never won the main title, he's never won any title.
really,
He's never. He wasn't an IC. He wasn't an IC champ. He's nothing. Not even a tag team champion. He's never ever had a
got
belt.
all Jakey no belts. Jesus,
I know, Jakey no belts. Just his snake. And
that's
it.
that's a t-shirt waiting to happen, Carl.
Jakey no.
That's shocking. That, like, how is that? How? Like,
Yeah,
see, that's even worse. I thought it was just world champion. Like, he's literally never won a belt.
nope, never
Not
won
with
a belt.
WWF anyway. That's
No,
crazy.
I mean, well, yeah, no, not with anyone really. I think he might have won one down at Stampede, like when he was really, really young. But
It's
you know,
the
he
only
never
one
won
he's got on his
anything.
wall right now.
Well, exactly. He never won
there.
anything with anyone. Do you know what I mean? So it's a shame, really, when you think about it, considering his kind of story career and the character work that he'd done.
Utterly crazy. And that's my main reason. Like, how has he not achieved those sort of levels? Those championships,
I mean,
those accolades, how has that not happened?
Like there was a couple of feuds there, like the one he had with Macho Man Savage, for example. Like that could have so been for the heavyweight title. Do you know what I mean? He was just such a byproduct of the Hogan era, where Hogan was such a mark for himself that no one ever got the fucking chance to win the main belt really while he was around.
I'm confident if he could have done Hogan versus Hogan, he would have.
Oh yeah, and you know, you would have ended up some way to make both Hogans win because no Hogan loses.
And I think that match would still be going on now.
Yeah, no, it's
kickouts and hulking up one after the other.
Oh god, yeah. Imagine that. Like they're both just unbeatable, aren't they, from each other? So, yeah, no, I think that's an excellent choice. You know, he's always kind of gone down as like, oh, great promo and stuff like that, but he was no slouch in the ring, and his style was.
I mean, I think he actually outshined himself, and his mic skills were better than his ring skills. But that's not to say his ring skills were bad. But
no,
you definitely
not.
remember him more for his promo work.
Well, that's it, and you know, at the time as well, like his finish, you know, just a DDT, which is now used as like fucking a standard move. Like that was devastating back in the day. It was very well protected, and it was like,
yeah,
you know, a really strong finish. But he had a lot going for him in that regard as well. But it just, I don't know, it just never paid off for him. I suppose you can kind of say on the one part. I know we've spoken about the likes of Moxley and things like that today. Like, does he really need a belt? Like, is that what he's about? But you know, you can kind of say something similar about Jake to a degree. But let's be honest, whoever you are, if you're in the business, you want to be the champ, don't you? So
that's the thing. Like, we're fortunate that I can say that. Like Moxley will go down as an AEW champion. He'll go down with whatever. I think he had the WWE title. I'm trying to remember because this was around the time they split it. I think he had the WWE title, not the Universal one. But he'll go down as a world champion a couple of times over, Moxley, whether you think that he should or not. Like you say, I don't think he needs it for the type of character he plays, but he's still got those accolades, which is not something you can say about Jake, shockingly.
No.
Unbelievably, actually.
Definitely a travesty, I think, in the business.
Really is. So do you want to finish our night, Carl? Do you want to finish our night with number 10?
I do. So I want to see whether mine is flipped. Okay. Yeah. Number 10. It doesn't really matter because I'm doing 10. So I could do any.
Do a 7. Go on, do a 7, Carl. It's not as easy as it looks.
No. Yeah.
Nice.
But actually, number 10. So this guy, a friend of the show, you may have seen we posted something a couple of weeks ago on our Instagram about this particular fella. And that fella is Christopher Daniels.
Yep.
So he's the only guy, as far as I'm aware, to have ever wrestled for every major wrestling promotion. So he's been in.
Yeah, I think that's
fair. He's been in WWE. He's been in WCW. He's been in TNA. He's been in all the Japan ones. He's been in fucking AEW as he is now. He's everywhere. Everywhere there's been a big.
On top of that, Carl, this is a man whose nickname, or one of his many nicknames, is the King of the Indies.
Well, there you go.
So that's how prominent he is in the likes of Ring of Honor and various other indie promotions.
Of course, yeah. Ring of Honor, for example. I think he's even in CZW and everything. This guy has been everywhere, right? But you know what he hasn't done? He's never won a world title.
See, fucking travesty, that. Absolute travesty.
If you look at the fucking how good of a performer he is, this guy in the ring, this guy was doing fucking Canadian destroyers and everything way before people knew what they were. Do you know what I mean? Him and P.T. Williams back in the X Division and TNA, fucking 10, 15 years ago, probably even longer. We're just tearing the shit up. Do you know what I mean? This guy is a phenomenal athlete, a phenomenal performer. And
couldn't agree more. And for anyone who's only seeing him in AEW at the minute, go back and watch some of his TNA work. Go watch some of his Ring of Honor work, because he's kind of playing the almost the veteran role in AEW. He's still a good performer, but if you want a proper example of what he's like, you need to have a look at some of the other work he's done.
Yeah, check out some of the X Division matches and stuff that he's done. Do you know what I mean? The stuff he's done in TNA, the stuff he's done in Ring of Honor. That guy was a fucking ledge, and he still is. It's just he's now, as you said there, Anthony, he's now kind of in that mentor role where he's putting other people over, and people like Scorpio Sky and things like that.
I think
giving them prominence.
And I think it's probably by his own choice, but you can clearly see that the idea is to get Scorpio Sky over with what's going on there, in all fairness. And again, fair play to them. They're trying to push younger talent, and that's much credit to Kazarian as well. But he is an absolute legend in the biz, and I want to see him have a really good AEW run, some sort of singles run there, because I think it gets the point across to the people who may have only seen AEW as to how good he actually is.
That's it. And, at the minute he's in SCU and he's kind of like a bit of a jokey kind of character and stuff. But some of the work he did is like the Fallen Angel, for example. Even his promos were just next level stuff. So, yeah, definitely.
I think that the Fallen Angel is that's the nickname that follows him as well, isn't it?
Yeah, defo. So, I can't think of anyone really more kind of deserving of this, because when you think about it, who else has worked every major company and not got a world title to show for it? How underrated can you be? If you were to be asked that question, who's worked every company and not one, you'd never even think of Christopher Daniels. And then once you know it's him, you're like, well, fucking hell, yeah, of course, because he's so underrated.
That's the thing. I think, to be honest, I think your social media post is underrated in that sense, because I don't think people fully appreciate how informative that post is, because it is that's a great fact for a wrestling quiz, but such a crazy fact really in that sense. It's up there with the Jake Roberts thing. What the fuck? How has that never happened? Unreal.
And the only other one I wanted to shoehorn in as a caveat, it's not an official one, only because I don't think he is underrated, because everyone knows he's the best.
Number
It
11.
Be me
Number 10 and a
talking
half.
up someone. It wouldn't be me talking up anyone if I wasn't talking up Mr. Perfect, because it's still a travesty. He was never a world champion, and it's mental. But he's not on this list because I don't think he was underrated. I think it's well known that he should have been a world champion, and everyone believes that to be true. So I didn't want to put him on this list, but at the same time,
but maybe this is another list. Maybe this is something we should do. People who bafflingly have never won a world championship.
Yeah,
because
I think that'd be a great list.
We've got a few candidates already. So I think maybe it needs to be a list in its own right, because we could probably list 10 who have never won that probably fucking should have.
Yeah, definitely.
And then
people
10 who did win and probably fucking shouldn't have.
Oh, God, yeah. So that's the next 2 weeks, sort of, guys. You heard it here first.
Indeed. So, sorry, yeah. So Mr. Perfect is, I can totally see why you brought him in. Not just because you love Mr. Perfect, but for that fact alone, it deserves a mention. But we'll give him a half. He's 10 and a half. Number 10 and a half is. Right. So, Carl, that was our unique segment of the week. That was the top 10 most underrated wrestlers. Anyone who is listening, I want to make it clear that these are 10 at random. Like, I don't think, I always struggle to rank them, so we don't at the moment. Like, I'm not saying like the number one underrated wrestler was Goldust. You know, it's just 10 people who we think are, because to be honest, and you might disagree here, Carl, but you've utterly convinced me on Christopher Daniels. I think he'd be close to number one if that were in any sort of ranked system. So I just want to make that clear that these are just 10 people who deserve that recognition rather than in any sort of discernible order.
Yeah, agree.
Hey guys, Santino Marella here. And if you're like me, you're sitting home during the quarantines. These are the times of quarantine. Well, I discovered a Wrestle Talk podcast called A to the K. It's changed my life. Now I don't want to go back to work. I just want to sit home in the quarantines and listen to Carl and Anthony. They are the best. Together, they're even better. So listen, A to the K. Wrestle Talk podcast. Check it out. Change your life. You'll be thanking me later.